We are so excited to welcome Dr. Sarah Oreck to the podcast today. She's a Columbia-trained reproductive psychiatrist and the founder of Mavida Health, a virtual mental health clinic supporting women through every phase of motherhood. But beyond the credentials, Sarah brings something even more powerful: lived experience. As a mother who's navigated miscarriage and second trimester loss, she understands just how isolating that journey can be and how often real support is missing. We are very excited to dive into all things maternal mental health. So welcome, Sarah.
Welcome. Thank you so much.
So excited to have you here. Dale and I were just talking about all the different aspects of mental health that come into your life when you become a mom. So there's the mom guilt, the mom shame, the mental load. There's just like constant stream of mental health issues that were not present before being a mom. And so, yeah, we'd love to just get into all of that today and understand maybe first off, like how you delved into the mental health space. Was this something that was always at the forefront of growing up? Did this come later in life? Like, how did you get to where you are?
No, this is great. Where should we start?
Yeah.
Let's start
tell me.
Yeah, maybe with where I started. So for me, I think, and I reflect on this because I used to start the story with like, well, in medical school, I had a really great OBGYN experience and I thought that I wanted to do that. But then I was struck by the people with mental health issues in obstetrics, so someone who was pregnant and maybe struggling. And I trained in the Bronx. So it was like an inner city, very kind of intense training. And I found that the women that were suffering from mental health issues during pregnancy or in the postpartum felt really alone, like underdogs. And so I immediately gravitated towards that. And then I fell in love with psychiatry. Like if you like tea and talking about things like and gossiping, psychiatry and therapy is for you. It's like I get the best tea ever. So that certainly like made the connection. But actually, as I reflect on it, when I was a tween, like 11 and 12, my mom had very early perimenopause. So in her early 40s, she started to struggle with hot flashes, just like a change in identity. And she found out that she was having very early perimenopausal symptoms. And ultimately, these took over her life. She had significant mood changes, depression. And I saw this at a really impressionable age. And I was kind of struck by it. It felt like she didn't have that many alternatives, like doctors weren't talking to her. She ultimately got on hormone replacement therapy, which really helped her. But that was like one of my first experiences with mental health issues in my life and in my family. And I think it's really like reverberated. And I think it cut to medical school and residency. It's like, why don't we know more about women's bodies, how we're different from men? And yet everything I learned in medical school was based on studies on men. And so ultimately, when I was in residency at Columbia, I was really lucky to have this specialization in reproductive psychiatry, which I think is the next substance use disorder, eating disorders. It'll be a carve out in behavioral health that's really a specialized field because our hormones make us more at risk for depression and anxiety and a slew of other mental health issues during our reproductive lives. And yet that's largely ignored.
That's what I always keep hearing, which shocks me, is the amount of research that's done on men, but not on women, and applying it to a woman's body, whether it's physical health, mental health. And I feel like just now people are starting to open the can of worms to like fertility. And then also it's like postpartum depression, but there's also prenatal depression that many people that I've spoken to have struggled with. And that I didn't even know about that till I was postpartum. I didn't know that was a possibility.
A third of people who have postpartum symptoms, they actually started in pregnancy.
Like no one talks about that.
No. That's absolutely right. It's like we're starting to talk about like, oh, heart attacks in women look different, right? Everything looks different with women. And that's why we were right. That's why we were excluded from studies because we had periods.
Exactly. And even like the smallest things, like I was listening to a podcast on Mel Robbins, I think with Dr. Stacey Sims, and all this intermittent fasting craze was done on men, right? And so she was like, no, actually women need to eat within 30 minutes of waking up because your cortisol spikes. Like we're different. And again, I was like, oh my God, like I've been doing it wrong. Like what? Like, so it's just all these things have been done on men. What are the most common mental health issues that you are seeing right now as it relates to moms?
Oh, so this is a big one. I think it's not a mental health issue, but certainly the identity shift. I think, why does this happen and you mentioned it earlier, it's sometimes the first time anyone experiences mental health issues is during their transition to parenthood. Why does that happen? One, it's the hormones. It's the first time your hormones increase to such significant levels, and then they plummet after you deliver. But also, it's all of the stressors. It's your finances are changing. Your interpersonal relationships are completely changing, the structure of your life, your career, your identity. So what we first start seeing is like, ooh, is this feeling good? Is this right for me? I'm not sure. And then that can snowball, especially if people don't have the outlets, the support, into depression, which is very common, but actually anxiety is the most common that we see in pregnancy and the postpartum.
What would you say the main difference is between anxiety and depression?
They come together a lot. But with anxiety, what I see is a lot of worries that sort of escalate into not functioning in the way that you want to. So a great example is in the postpartum. If you are afraid, many people have intrusive thoughts, which are these weird thoughts or images that come up.
I definitely had. I still do have them.
Yes. I mean, you're 8 months out.
Yes.
I mean, it's still going to continue. And actually, people have them all the time. Everyone has intrusive thoughts, but it's during this really vulnerable time that they start to impact you in different ways, and they kind of get stickier. Before, maybe in college, you were like, oh, I imagined that professor naked and that was weird and I'm not going to think about that again. But like now it really sticks in your mind. And also your amygdala has grown, which is the alarm system of your brain. And it's in some ways to protect your child. Like, think about one of the most common intrusive thoughts that I have too is going down the stairs with my baby and imagining us falling down.
All the time.
Exactly. And so what does that do? Actually, it's biologically wiring your brain to say like, okay, I'm going to look at the steps. I'm going to hold on to my baby a little tighter so it's protective. But it can feel really scary because you're like, do I want to drop my baby? What's happening here? And so obviously intrusive thoughts are going to be something that happens a lot in anxiety. Worries about the baby, health concerns, that happens a lot, especially now, right? There's a lot around, oh, I got this vaccine. What's going to happen to my baby? That's a great example. And it stops you from maybe behaving in the way that you would normally behave, not allowing other people to take care of your baby and feeling like you're the only one that can do it right, which then overwhelms you with so much of the load. And then what we see is that this anxiety, if left untreated, sometimes snowballs into depressive symptoms. So then I'm isolated. I don't want to go out. I don't want to leave my bed. I feel like my baby is better off with another mom.
Right. And then that snowballs into identity crisis and issues with your
what
partner.
What am I doing? What was this choice that I made? Will I ever have my career again? Will I ever have friends?
And you start to like completely snowball. You mentioned the hormone plummet.
Yes.
And I don't know if I've made this up, but I noticed day 3 postpartum is a crazy day.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a thing where day 3, I literally, every time I have had a breakdown, and I thankfully have not had postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety to an extent where I was like concerned or anything, just, like quote unquote normal postpartum emotional experiences. But I find that day 3, I was super vulnerable. And I think a lot of it does have to do with this hormone plummet, and people don't know about this.
Yes. And this is actually something that happens in about 85% of people. A little bit of what you're describing is called baby blues. But baby blues is like a weird term that people don't really understand, because it can be some anxiety. It can be just your mood fluctuating from like a moment of I'm so happy to I'm so tearful, feel so vulnerable, I'm so raw after this happened. And it kind of peaks after 5 days. So for some people in that range, but we really see that in the first 2 weeks of having a baby. And I think it can be mistaken sometimes for symptoms of depression. It's not. It typically goes away. It's just this like real vulnerability and rawness that we think comes from the biggest plummet that you see in your sex hormones like estrogen and progesterone in your entire life. And they're just sort of coming back to normal. It can be really shocking when it happened to you for the first time, and then when you don't know it's going to happen. So it's really nice to be armed with like, oh, here's what's happening. And if it continues, or if I feel hopeless after this, then maybe I need some more care and some more support.
From someone who has done all of this research and knows a lot, you also went through a miscarriage, right? In your second trimester.
Yes.
First of all, I'm so sorry that happened to you, but was it any quote unquote better because you knew, or was equally as...
No. I mean, even with my other pregnancies, I had anxiety through them. My first pregnancy was like COVID-19 had just started. I was like 3 months pregnant when the pandemic kind of shut everything down. And so that was really hard for me. I already have a little baseline anxiety, and it just like ratcheted up. Like, I can't go to the hospital. I can't go to the doctor because I'm going to get COVID. What's going to happen? There's no vaccines. So I was not immune. I thought I would be because I'm like, I've seen it all. I know exactly what to expect. But it's really difficult, especially in that time where like my normal supports, the normal community, the village just wasn't accessible. We couldn't see anyone or do anything. And then with my loss, it just like, it hit me like no other. I thought it'd be really different, but I felt like it was very isolating. I have a supportive husband and family, but it's just when you're the only one that's carried this life, I think it's hard for people to relate. And so I felt really alone in it. And I know that that's something a lot of people have discussed. And that's why I think it's so important for us to come out of the shadows, be more open about it, because it's only once it happens to you that you're like, oh, and my sister had that. And oh, and your grandma had 3 losses.
Right.
You don't hear about it. So you feel very alone. And I think also as perfectionists, you're like, what's wrong with my body? Why can't I do this?
Was this with your second after you had your first, or was this
my third?
Your third. Wow.
And now I've had 4 pregnancies, so I have a third baby.
Right.
But when I was pregnant with my third child, now people would say like, "Oh, is this your third pregnancy?" Because they knew I had 2 kids, and I said, "Actually, is my 4th." That was really like, you kind of ask things as if, "Oh, are you pregnant for the first time?" But you don't know if that person has tried 7 times.
I love that you said that, because it's important to normalize that conversation because people have no idea.
And it's like, it's slightly awkward. And I'm like, no, this feels right. It honors the experience that I had, that I have been pregnant 4 times. And that means something. And that's felt to me like a little bit of a ritual where I don't feel like that whole experience is forgotten.
That's so true, because I remember right before I conceived my first child, I had a chemical pregnancy, and I didn't know much about it then. But I remember right after I had that chemical pregnancy, we were out with some friends, and they were like, "Oh, are you going to start trying?" And I was like, I actually did. And I was very open about it. I'm like, I had this chemical pregnancy. And she was like, "Oh, I also miscarried before my first." But I kind of made a point, like, especially then, because it was so painful for me, that I was just going to talk about it. Like, not to go into a whole conversation, but just be like, yep, like this is what happened to me. And it's so crazy, because once you do open up, you realize how many people have gone through it. And there's just like a part of you that I feel like it's never fully healed. Like, you just can't,
there's no resolution.
And I also felt like, especially going through a chemical pregnancy, it was so short-lived that it wasn't technically what they call a miscarriage, but I still felt that like mourning, and that like, oh my gosh, what I thought would be something was just gone in an instant.
You're attached to that. And I think this is so important. And I make a point of it through Mavida Health, is even when you're freezing your eggs or trying to conceive, to me, you're already a mother, because that idea, that fantasy is already planted in your mind, right? Like when you were trying to conceive, you had that idea that I want to be a mother. And that's where it's so difficult, chemical, whatever, like a whatever time that this happens, I think it's the loss of what you imagined, of a fantasy of what this would be. I was pregnant with my third pregnancy with a girl, and I had wanted a girl for so long. And so it was really hard to let go of that. I was lucky my 4th is also a girl, but it was really challenging. And it was this idea of a baby. Also, when I had my loss, it was around 16 weeks, and I wasn't taught this in medical school, but your milk comes in if you have a loss after like 14, 15 weeks. And so I had breasts full of milk and no baby, which just felt so cruel and difficult. And I had so many issues with like engorgement, and I was just like, I can't believe this is happening when there's no baby. Like, how could this be?
As someone who's really in this space, do you find that actually talking about these experiences helps you heal?
100%. And I was so closed off. I generally am like pretty like, oh, I have to keep it together for my patients. And obviously I don't do this in front of my patients, but like I have to keep it together and I don't want to talk too much about it. And I'm generally like a pretty private person, but I was building Mavida Health as this happened. And I was so lucky that my co-founder had a 20-week loss in her first pregnancy. She now has 2 kids. And it was like almost a decade ago, but she's like, I've been there exactly. Like I was showing this happened to her at work. I mean, it was really traumatic, but I think there's also this element of like, I was telling people I was pregnant. Right, people were seeing my belly.
I was going to say, at this point, it's 16 weeks, you generally have told people, and especially when people are like, how's your pregnancy going? And you haven't shared it. Like, what was that experience like? How did you navigate that?
And how do you like remove the shame and just
so
like
much
own
shame.
it? Right.
I know.
So how do you do
so
that?
Much shame. Well, it was tough because after I had already 2 babies. Like you show so fast.
Yes.
Your uterus knows what to do and it just gets really big really fast. I was like, oh my God, I look huge now. And for me, I think it really hit on, and luckily I've been in therapy for like 15 years and that's something that's a very important part of my life. And for me, it was like, oh my God, how can I have been vulnerable, showed this? I had my other 2 babies during the pandemic and I literally hid it from like everyone.
Wow.
And I was like, oh God, now I'm showing my body and everyone's going to know and everyone's going to have an opinion. It was really hard. And I think it was through testing things out, having my co-founder, who's now my best friend, be able to have that shared experience for me was just like a really life-changing way that I realized like, oh, people can hold some of my vulnerability. I'm also an only child, so this may come from that as well. But I think it let me work through some of my issues with like not trusting that people can hold my kind of difficult feelings or that I have to be the strong one. You know, I always became like the therapist to all my friends early on. It's like I would be the holder of all things.
Because that's what you do also all day.
Right.
When you're
but even before I was.
But even before,
yes.
but as in before in your professional life, like you are holding so much space for people, and that sometimes the people that are carrying all that, you know, that weight and holding that space for people aren't releasing it to others and unloading on them.
And that's really important because I think it's a signal of like the caregiver fatigue that we have in this country. And women are so much the default caregivers, which is just like a whole other subject on its own. But I think it goes to identity. It goes to why we struggle so much because we're really told all these different messages. Oh, be a boss. Be a, you know, you can do, women can do whatever
the whole
they
girl boss
want.
era was just so in our faces like, oh, you have to be a founder and do
Lean
this.
in,
and
whatever it
is.
Yeah. And also you have to take care of everyone, yourself and everyone in your family and your parents. And exactly. I'm also in the sandwich generation. Yes. And so it's just really overwhelming and impossible. And then you feel guilt for the things or the caregiving that you're not giving.
Wait, let's talk about that though more. So when you become a mom, you experience this mental load.
Yes.
Right? There's this motherhood mental load.
Well, you always had it. You had some kind of load.
You always had it, but I think it becomes even more pronounced when you are, as you said, the default parent. So can you define what that means, this mental load?
Mental load is all of the invisible labor, all of the things that go into the appointments, the to-do list, when to buy diapers, when to get the next batch of formula. I mean, the list goes on, but overwhelmingly in heterosexual couples, it tends to fall on the women. And we see that this is a huge cause, both of the identity issues, women leaving the workforce, but ultimately of having a really difficult time with our identity. And I think it's one of the root causes of mom guilt. And mom guilt, I was thinking about this, is it also mom guilt is like also feeding back to the invisible load. Like I was thinking the other day, I sometimes feel some guilt that I work a lot. And I have a company and I decided to grow this company after having, you know, my second child. It was like a very purposeful decision. And knowing that I wasn't going to be with my kids 24/7 and that I would have to rely on caregivers. Both my mom lives with us, but I also have paid caregivers. And this is difficult sometimes. And sometimes I wonder, do I then take on being room parent? Do I then take on doing all these things to try to compensate for those times where I feel like I'm not 100% present? And I was thinking more about that. And I said, you know who doesn't do that? My husband. He doesn't compensate. He is fine with going to work, you know, providing for our family and then spending the time that he has available with the kids. And so when I think to myself is like, when I know I'm killing it as a mom is when I feel like a dad.
Totally.
Where I feel like, oh, I'm fulfilling these like professional roles that are important to me, growing my career, having friends. And then I have the space to just come home and not feel guilty, but feel like I'm having really great one-on-one time with my kids. And I feel like I have the space to probably be the best mom that I can, but it's hard because we're also told like, you also need to be a 1950s mom. And you know, our administration wants us all to go back in the house. So it's a really complicated mixture of messages.
And how do you navigate like, okay, so you're at home, you're like, I'm going to be present with my kids. How do you navigate that feeling of I could be doing more at work? Should I be doing this? But also trying to balance that. Like, how do you navigate those thoughts? Because I feel like so many of us working moms,
ourselves included.
Yeah, ourselves included, who were, climbing the corporate ladder or building businesses, just go, go, go. And now we're like, we can't do it all at the same time. So how do you mentally, like, I guess, work through that?
Well, I think the first thing, and I love that this is integral to our therapy at Mavida, is like re-exploring what your values are.
Mm-hmm.
Your values change so much, especially when you have a baby. And it may mean that like that corporate ladder doesn't mean as much to you anymore. Or that high income doesn't mean as much, even though with unaffordable childcare.
That's the thing is with the childcare costs.
Right, exactly. So I think there's two things going on here. Your values can shift and change, and you can prioritize being at home, and that may be something that is important to you, and you can take some time from whatever you're doing. It's really hard to like do both. Something has to give. So if you do want that career, then you have to kind of come to terms with, I'm not going to be spending 24/7 with my kids. Is that okay for me?
Okay, but hold on. So I agree that our priorities change, but societal pressures don't change.
That's the second. Right. That's the second thing.
So it's like,
and this has unlocked something for me. So the second thing is like, okay, a lot of this is external.
Mm-hmm.
It's this societal structure where there's no paid federal leave, where there's unaffordable childcare, where there's these systems in place that really force us to kind of do both and like not feel totally great about what we're doing. But then I think about, where's mom guilt coming from? And I really think it's from the patriarchy.
Yes.
Right? It's from a patriarchy that doesn't necessarily want me to succeed in my career and sort of be a boss and have my own wealth. And it wants me to keep me in the home. And then I think, well, that's not what I want. So I'm going to do the most subversive thing right now. And I'm going to say, this mom guilt is something that's imposed on me. How can I kind of set it aside? It comes, it visits me, but I'm like, hey there, I'm good. I'm going to go back to what I was working on, and kind of just letting it be there without making it a part of like who I am. Because it starts to be like this integral, like, I'm doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I must not be a good mom, right? It starts to like get at like our value as like a parent or as a worker. And so I think it's something about like, think about who's imposing this on us. And I'm like, I'm good without it.
But it's, for me, it's like not just the structures in place that add this pressure. It's more of like societal pressures to do quote unquote the right thing, like the breastfeeding versus formula, sleep training versus not. And all of that adds this mom guilt layer too. So it's not just the patriarchy, it's more of like what's expected of moms.
I think there's been this horrible pendulum swing when it comes to and it's almost like these binaries. You must breastfeed, or you must not sleep train, or sleep train, whatever it is that people want these days, that like fluctuates. But I think it's all about like, if that works for you, great. If it doesn't, don't do it.
But all of that, I think, adds just so much
to the plate.
Especially as a first-time mom.
100%.
I told Dale the reason why I felt so much better this time around as my second-time mom is because of that pressure. I just didn't care. I didn't care about what people told me about breastfeeding formula. I didn't care that she wasn't gaining weight as fast as possible. That, I had a lot more.
And what clicked, do you think?
It was just more, I have more confidence in myself as a mom. So I'm not looking for other people's opinions.
Yes.
The first time around, I was like, oh, everyone has more experience. The doctors, the more like the second time moms that I'm asking, everyone is more credible than me. And I am not. I am a newbie. So I'm going to listen to all of these people. Now it's like,
and there's so many
my
inputs.
Intuition, and I am the mom. I know what's best. And yes, I still need sometimes opinions.
Of course.
But I can garner down the exact things that I want to take from that and then do what I feel is right.
And that's truly what we think is at the core of our therapy, is like, how do we reduce the noise?
Yes.
So you can kind of filter it through what matters and the lens that matters to you.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was like, oh, breastfeeding would be nice, but I got super engorged. My breasts were like the size of watermelons. And all the lactations, this is the best problem to have. You're so lucky. And I was like, oh no, I'm like spraying out milk. Like that doesn't feel good to me. And I decided I'm going to take in those inputs. But even as a physician, it was hard to like not listen to what everyone else was saying. And I thought, you know what? I know what the studies are. I feel comfortable. Like I'm going to reduce the breastfeeding because it's making me anxious. It's making me sad. I wake up 100 times a night with like so much pain. And I decided not to do it. And for me, that was very freeing. I think we're all sort of subjected to it. And I think it's important to figure out what are the tools that I can use, again, to filter this information and to make it my own. Because it's not a one size fits all. And yet we talk like that. That's what advice feels like when you go on Instagram.
Yeah. And it's also very easy to get triggered because there's so much content and noise out there of someone doing it differently and preaching that this is the only way to do it.
I mean, parenting advice is like that. You should talk to your kids like this.
Yeah.
You seem angry. I was like, I don't talk like that. That's not authentic to me. You know what I mean? And I think we want to parrot what that says, but ultimately parenting advice, mothering advice, it should all be like little great, like, oh, that's great. It's like when you see clothing that other people wear, it's like, oh, that's nice. That could look good on me or it might not, but I don't have to have it.
And it almost feels like it's political, this, especially on social media. It's like those who co-sleep, those who do not. Those who sleep train, those who don't. Those who breastfeed, those who formula feed. The ones who stay at home moms, the working moms. It feels like you have to pick a side.
I know.
And that I keep seeing these arguments in social media, like the fights of this kind of mom versus that kind of mom. And, you know, as much as it is the patriarchy, it's a lot of moms shaming other moms.
Yeah, there's so much of that.
That's where I feel it's really, really strong. And I think a lot of moms feel like they're going to be judged by other moms and how they parent.
Yes.
And it's just really contributes, like as Annabelle said, especially as a first-time mom, when you haven't gone through it and all you can see is the wake windows, the sleep schedules. You think it's going to be forever. You think you're stuck in this 2-month phase.
So temporary.
You don't know. Yeah. So I think that's why everyone gets so attached and freaked out. And then you look back and you're like, well, it doesn't really matter if I formula fed or breastfed. My kid eats snacks off the floor.
Yes.
So
yes,
it just
exactly,
is like.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's great, not to get political, but I even think there's so many aspects of this that feel very much like how we control women's bodies in their reproductive lives. It's the same kind of, so I would argue that I think it is patriarchal, even though women aren't inflicting it, where I think like it's the same, it's policing what I eat, what I do with my breasts, what I do with my baby at night. I think there's a lot of kind of policing our bodies throughout this experience, which also feels so overwhelming. And like, no, you should decide what's right for you. I think breastfeeding is just like one of those topics that really gets me fired up.
So what are like a few of your most vital tips for a mom who's just struggling in this postpartum phase? I know obviously there's SSRIs, but a lot of people are hesitant because of the weaning off of them and tapering. And that can be a big fear for a lot of moms.
Misinformation.
Yeah, misinformation. Yes. So what would you suggest would be your main tips for a mom who's really struggling?
Yeah, maybe it's not like depression, but it's like.
No, it's all right.
It's just baby blues. It's like what you
adjusting
said,
to motherhood, I think, is universal crisis for everyone. And so for me, the first thing is, I think what we started to talk about of like, there is going to be a lot of advice. And it's really important to figure out throughout this, and it may change what your idea, what you value, what you want, and how to filter that so it applies to you. Right? It's the same thing of like, I wouldn't go and just look at some model who has different skin tone as me and be like, I want all of her makeup. I would say like, how is this going to adjust to look good on me? That's the same thing we should do with all of this type of advice. The other big thing is community and support that is flexible and is willing to kind of consider other points of view. Oh, I didn't use formula, but I think that would be great for you. There's nothing wrong with it, right? I think we get into really tricky stuff where it's like, that's not something you should ever do. You know, I know some doulas who like forbid their clients from like having formula just in case at home. I'm like, what's up?
Yeah, right.
What's up with that? Me seeing a can of formula is not going to stop me from breastfeeding. It's like they're almost saying we're stupid. that we can't make a choice for ourselves, that somehow that can of formula is going to be so tempting that I'm going to not breastfeed.
Right. It's not drugs.
Right. It's like, right. You can't, right. Exactly. It's like, so that to me is pretty insulting, as well as like, it's so different for everyone. Some women have to go back to work after 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. How can they pump when there's no privacy? There's no place to do it. It's just unrealistic application. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work for everyone. So I think that a community that's flexible and is there for you, I think is so important. And then ultimately, what I would love for all of us is more systemic change that really makes being a parent something we want to do, something that's easier, something, I think it's like your own body, your own mind is all changing and your own like micro life, but then there's no support systems to make that an easier transition. So I think we're going to see, and we are seeing higher rates of depression, anxiety. And then obviously if people have had mental health issues like bipolar disorder, substance use, PTSD, ADHD, those things continue during pregnancy and postpartum.
Yeah, I think that all of these things are just so important to assess. And especially when you were talking about the, systemically and how our society is set up, that people don't want to become parents because there is no support.
No.
There is no paid leave unless your company provides that, but no government paid leave. And childcare costs are so expensive that people are just really caught between a rock and a hard place because they're like, either I quit my job and make no money so I can take care of my kids, or I spend all my money on childcare and then I'm working, but I don't.
And the default parent really almost always is the mom.
Yeah. And we're always the one who's going to take the hit,
leave the workforce,
career-wise. And
it's not always just, it's also like when the nanny calls out sick or when your child needs to come home from school. It's like, who's the one that's canceling their meeting? Who's the one that's going there? And like, yes, it's amazing. We both have husbands that we're lucky enough who can help split that with us, but it's still like, it's on us. It's that mental load again.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
How do you also navigate the balance between, I feel like there's this loss and grieving when you become a mom of your past self, and then this becoming of a new mom and how beautiful that is. And we're so grateful, but we also have to balance that with mourning our past self,
I love
our
that.
body, our identity, all of that.
I love that. And I think this kind of speaks to, you can always hold two things at once. Like, I love my children. When we were displaced and moving like to 3 different locations, I was like, why don't I have one
By
kid?
the way, she got evacuated because of the fires, LA fires.
I had to leave my home in the Palisades. So it's like, why do I have 3 children and not just 1 or 0? Because this would be so much easier. Instead, I have like this entourage with me that made it really hard. It doesn't mean I don't want my children. It just means that I can have a moment of saying, gee, this would be easier if the context was different. And I know that there's like a lot of those like Reddit threads that are like, I wish I never had children. And people are like, how could people? Because like it's okay to have like this fantasy and this other part of you that's like, gee, I really miss what it was like to, I don't know, be able to hang out all weekend and not do anything, or just kind of like roll out of bed and go to brunch and not be woken up at 6 a.m. So I think that there is something so important in like, let's just bring it to the surface. Let's stop denying that this is something that we all experience and just say, we can have this tremendous joy and you can have this mourning, sadness, and loss. All of these things can coexist. I think we're starting to learn to coexist more with that, because I think that's something people feel quite frequently. It's like you can see the atrocities that are happening and also feel joy in your private or like micro life. And like you can hold both of those things. It's really hard, but I think it's part of what being a human being is. But I think our culture is so used to like, I want to avoid, I want to like distract myself from these difficult feelings.
Right. And it's constantly consuming so that you get out of the feeling instead of taking that moment of stillness and realizing
and
what
just
it
being
is.
like, oh, this feeling doesn't feel great, but like, hi there, how are you? And it's going to pass. Just like every sleep regression will pass. I think it's about being able to kind of start to confront some of those difficult feelings instead of shopping, using drugs, watching
social media,
TV, numbing, scrolling through social media. Those are all sort of numbing and distracting techniques.
But it's also like we are our own harshest critics. Like we are not comparing ourselves to other people. Sometimes we're comparing ourselves to our past versions of ourselves, and that almost feels harder.
Oh, it's so hard because you are constantly evolving. it's so interesting, the extremes. It's like at one hand, you need to be a trad wife, and the next you need to be, I don't know, like Hillary Clinton. Like it's like you can't do all of those things at the same time. But in some ways, like that's an expectation. And I don't think the heterosexual men have those ideas of themselves.
No, definitely. And it's, it's funny because my husband, he's very involved, and on the weekends, it's family time. At night, he does my toddler's bedtime routine. I take care of the baby. And like, I would say whenever he's not working, it's family. However, he has it's this kind of like unspoken rule that, if he has a late night at work, he tells me, oh, I'm not going to be home till X. Yeah. But if I have an event, like we throw these More Than Mom events, it's a month in advance. I've already planned out that I have to leave at 6 and I got the nanny to stay, and then the mother-in-law to come. Yeah. And I'm like rounding the troops.
Yes.
And it's like, I have to ask permission and he has to tell me.
Yep.
And I think a lot of moms struggle with that because yes, it's the unspoken rule. He goes into an office, he's the breadwinner, but we both contribute. And it's just that I always have this feeling of like, I'm responsible for if I take a night off. But like for him, it's like, okay, I'm not going to be home till this time. And
by the way, you're not even taking a night off. You're like working.
And I'm working. Exactly. I'm working to go work. That's why I don't leave my house much.
Right.
Yeah, but it's also on the weekends. If you have plans, we used to just go off on our own and make plans. But now it's like, do you mind if I go get a blowout for the event? Or do you mind if I go get my nails done? Or go for coffee with my friend? It's like I have to ask.
I know. And I think like it's doing these like trials at home with just like little tiny things. Like we're going to Europe in the summer, and we all the adults have global entry, but my kids don't. And I've heard the custom lines are very long for reasons we won't get into. But I was like, I would do this. This is like so me. It's documents. It's like official stuff. Like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to give it to my husband. He's very organized. He can figure this out. And we're kind of leaving it be and see what happens. And that's something like I would never do. And I'm just sort of trying to practice what it's like to just say, I have an event next week at this time.
Yes, I've been getting so much more comfortable with that. And like, there's a bunch of things that he coordinates that I will say, like for us, I don't carry the mental load on my own. Like he's coordinating the doctor's appointments, and there is a lot of that going on. And I also think in the early days of postpartum, especially if you are nursing, a lot of moms get resentful of their husbands because they can just get up and be like, oh, I'm running an errand. But the mom is like, okay, I just breastfed for like an hour. I have this much time. I have to come back. And it's just this, we're so chained. And then we see our husbands have all this freedom and like, yes, they're there to support, but it's this different. You start to get this, like you get resentful because you're like, my life is sectioned into windows and it's not there.
And it carries on in motherhood too. Do you have experiences in resentment, especially like with Mavida?
Oh, 100%. I think this is something that we do couples therapy, which is really unique and I think is so essential.
Both Dale and I have done it with our husbands for fun. It's amazing, especially when we became parents. I think your communication needs to be up-leveled.
Yes. So that's 100% right. We're like we're exactly on the same page. I think a lot of people think it's for when you're about to divorce or break up. We disagree completely.
Like what's the point? You should get better at being in a relationship.
Exactly. It's
We're always bettering ourselves.
Exactly. Why don't you want to become a better communicator and have a like tighter relationship with this person that now you're going to have to do all of this work with? But it's so interesting to hear you all, and I hear myself, and I'm like, I sound like a 1950s like woman talking about like how I have to do all these things, and it's like, but I married this partner who like believes in women's rights and like and it's really interesting the ways that we've progressed, and then the ways where like we like haven't totally, and like it's really interesting. And I think it's our role to teach, if we have sons, but certainly even in our own homes to kind of be like, okay, this is the default, but how come? How can I change this? In therapy, is this something we can talk about? I love that your husband does the pediatrician appointments. Like that's not totally that common.
Yeah, teaching also the next generation. Today I was telling Dale, my daughter Gemma, her friend came over. He's 2 years old, and he brought her a massive orchid. Flowers.
So cute.
And I have a picture of him giving it to her, and they hugged and kissed. It was the cutest thing ever.
So sweet.
And this is like, you got to teach them young.
Yeah. You really
100%. I'm like, I'm going to teach because I have 2 sons, And I was like, I'm going to teach them that like emptying the dishwasher, doing the laundry. Yesterday I did laundry with my son, and I was like teaching him how to fold. And of course he didn't really know what was going on, but he kept saying when he got to the crib that he really wanted to take my clothes with him and keep folding. And I just want to get them used to like domestic labor, because also women these days, like a lot of us were contributing financially. We're also contributing at home. Like we, in some ways, feminism
disproportionately
has
contributing
helped us, but also feminism has kind of screwed us over because now we're doing everything.
Two jobs instead of one.
But I understand it, because it's also like you should have your own identity, you should have your own path. And like financially, it feels good to be stable in the event of something to happen. Your eggs aren't all in one basket. So I see both sides, but I do struggle with it, because a big part of me is like, I like to make my own money, and I do not want to be financially relying on someone else. But on the other hand, I'm like, but now I'm stuck doing all roles, and it's not going to be perfect. And it's not. So it is this struggle that I feel like some days I'm like all for feminism. Other days I'm like, oh, screw you.
Yeah. But it's like, it's loosening some ideals that we have around it. And I know that with my husband, when we were living together, there was a lot of shared chores. Like he already did the laundry. Like we would trade off cooking. And then somehow like something happened after we had kids where like it started to shift, or like children, maybe we wouldn't talk about that exactly of how it was going to go down in terms of roles. And I think that's a really big opportunity that couples have now of like, how can you start the conversation just like when you live together and both of you did the dishes, but like, it's not so unheard of, right? But somehow there's like the shift with kids where it's like, oh, because you breastfeed the child, like I can't do anything. It's like, no, you can learn to do those things. And so I think outlining expectations, talking about roles, like being really explicit, it's your role to do X, Y, and Z now, I think is a way that we can kind of push this forward. But unfortunately, it's a lot of work on us to even, I wish it could just be like, you intuitively know what I need and you pick up the slack. So
and it really also starts in pregnancy, because the mom's carrying the baby.
The baby, quite literally.
From tracking, if you're tracking your ovulation, like it's your body, it's everything is happening to you. So I think, as you said, like the transition, what point did it change? It's like the second you decide you want to have a baby, it's on the mom. This is all happening to the woman's body.
But even shifting, like I know the baby gear is such a big deal, but I also see that it's like mostly moms researching the best stroller and all these things. It's like, give some of that up so you can start kind of on the same, you look at the best stroller, I'll look at the best changing table, whatever it is.
You're so right about that. I never thought about it.
But I think it's also like trusting them too, like to make their own decisions, because sometimes
you might end up with the ugly stroller you didn't want.
Right. But like letting go. I will delegate and then be like, oh, come on, But at the same time, I need to trust that he will do it in his way, and it doesn't need to be perfect, and it doesn't need to be the exact way that I would do it. But what would you say to someone who's dealing with a lot of resentment to their partner? Because resentment comes up for us a lot with our community. We do a series called Vent Away Fridays where moms just vent about everything.
And we respond to their vents.
And
then we post it on our stories.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to be tuning into that. Yeah. That's great.
So a lot of it has been on like mother-in-laws, like kids getting sick, like things like that. But there is a lot of things around resentment and feeling bitter towards their partner because they're not picking up the slack or they're not doing X, Y, Z. And it's such an ugly emotion, I find, resentment. And so yes, any tips?
And like what's at the core of resentment? It's really unmet expectations, right? Like continuously. And so I think where that comes for me is like there is a issue with the communication.
Totally.
Like to me, like that is it. And so how does one kind of start to get at the resentment? First, being able to identify that you have resentment is a really big step, because often resentment for people just becomes like things that you just project out. You kind of channel it in different ways. But if you can say, oh, I'm angry, I'm upset because of X, Y, and Z, you're starting to do some of that work. And then ultimately, it needs to become really granular. He didn't drop out or he didn't do whatever it is that you expect. So talk about it. Say, hey, I'm upset because this happened. Not you're so lazy, you don't know what you're doing, right? Like start with an I statement is a really basic thing that is sort of such a key to good communication. My feelings were hurt. I had this experience because of what happened, and not the blaming, like, you didn't do this, that's why I feel bad.
Yeah, that we were just talking about that, like for Mother's Day, for example, is, we were like last year, maybe
unmet expectations.
Right. But we also have to be able to express what we truly want. They can't read our minds.
Nope.
Yeah. When we were talking about our Mother's Day and our husbands really like showed up this year. And I was like, I'm so proud of our husbands, but I'm also proud for us for telling them it was important to us. And we even like made a joke about it, like behind every, wife who is posting her like amazing Valentine's Day or birthday gift from her husband or Mother's Day is a wife who probably communicated to her husband, this is what I wanted.
Yeah.
So I know that the core, it's like cliche, but the core of everything is truly communication. And I think if it's not, one thing that my therapist always will say to me is if it's not working for you, it's not working for them.
Yes.
So you really have to make sure that like in your life and every aspect, it's not fair to either party to withhold
exactly
the information that is making you, because then you're going to be resentment. And then what happens? Then it's the constant blame, the constant arguments, the pettiness and
nagging.
And like tit for tat. So it doesn't help anything.
I know. And an example is like you can tell them what you want or shift your expectations. So for me, I have always been disappointed by all of our holidays. My husband like does so much in our home and is like such a doer, but like he's just not that romantic, or like romantic gestures are to him like aren't how he expresses love. And so he started asking me, do you want flowers or what do you want? And I was like, this isn't what I want, is you asking me what I want. And ultimately he did get some flowers, which were lovely. And I thought I could be angry because I didn't have, this bigger show. There's no rose petals. I mean, there's never been rose petals anywhere in my house, but like, there's no big gestures here. And then he asked me where I wanted to go to dinner. I chose it. I made the reservation, and that's like his limitations. And that's not how he shows up for me. And if he did show up, like it didn't feel that authentic. It would feel like me like puppeting what I wanted. And so I said, I accept this about him. I love him for all the other things. And like, if I want a big Mother's Day, I guess I just have to do it for myself.
Well, you bring up the word acceptance, I think has been so instrumental, not really with my husband, but also like with my in-laws and other people around our family, just accepting them for who they are, not expecting some grand thing, not expecting them to do all these check-ins and all these fantasies I may have in my head. Instead being like, I'm accepting them for who they are. They are amazing what they are, and I can't change someone.
But you can't. And so it's like, can I receive sort of that love and affection and attention from him in other ways? And it's not the big gestures. And I'm okay with that.
And on the flip side, I'm sure there are things that I do. I know there are things that I do that my husband has told me a million times. And it's just, he has to accept about me, And I think that there are so many things that, we both feel like the other person sometimes doesn't see. And it's sometimes you have to take a step back and be like, okay, yes, maybe they're falling short in this area, but I also have my areas.
Yes.
And I need to
just have a little grace.
Yeah, have a little grace for that. Like, I know I'm stubborn about my closet space. And when the baby took over his closet, that I've been really like inching him away from, putting anything in my closet. But he's like, we all have to make sacrifices.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, fine. It's just, I guess, the communication aspect and understanding that everyone's coming from often doing their best. And if not, we have to talk about it.
Yes. Okay. So we're almost out of time, but I want to just quickly touch on Mavida Health and what services you offer, how you can help moms in different stages of postpartum, motherhood, even before motherhood.
Yeah. So our app is called Mavida Health. You can find us at mavidahealth.com, and our Instagram is at Mavida Health. And it's a fantastic app that really takes you from trying to conceive. So even if you're thinking about freezing your eggs, all the way through the postpartum. And we're actually having a lot of people sneak in for perimenopause as well. So it's kind of extending out. It's all virtual care, and it's prescribing individual therapy, group therapy, and couples therapy, as well as evidence-based content that we've created in-house to kind of support this journey, whether it's meditations, whether it's assignments, as well as a community chat that's really active for those that are like struggling with this transition to motherhood and mental health issues. And we are available for free, the evidence-based content in the community across the US. And our clinical care is available in California, New York, and New Jersey. And we're in network with many commercial PPO insurance, which is a game changer.
That's amazing.
So where can everyone find find you?
I'm at Sarah Oreck MD on Instagram.
Amazing. We'll link it in the show notes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah. This is amazing.
Thank you.